The world's 10 most earthquake-prone countries. Earthquakes can happen without warning and cause serious damage in just a matter of seconds. However, some countries have to deal with them more than others. In this video, we'll look at 10 countries where earthquakes are very common, why they happen there, and how people handle the risk. Let's go. Number 10. Turkey. It should come as no surprise that Turkey lands on this list, considering it has around 350 earthquakes a year. Each of these earthquakes is, of course, on the small end of the scale and doesn't really cause much more than minor damage. But the amount seems to be increasing, and this can be dangerous, with lives and property at risk. The country is situated on the Anatolian Plate and is bordered by one of the Eurasian and Arabian plates. Yet, the Arabian Plate continues to move toward the Eurasian Plate, resulting in the displacement of the Anatolian Plate. So, what does this result in? Recurrent tremors. To cope with the adverse effects, Turkey is undertaking efforts to construct stronger and more earthquake-resistant structures in the country. The state is also enhancing coordination between the government and the population in dealing with natural calamities. Not only that, it is also developing its technology to be able to receive rapid notifications. Interestingly, even though earthquakes are common, Turkey remains home to many people, because what's there not to love about the beautiful country? Number 9. China. China is located in the region of 3 plates, which include the Indian, Eurasian, and Pacific plates. And these plates are always in movement, and this is the reason as to why China has so many earthquakes. And as expected, some of these earthquakes have had catastrophic destruction and loss of lives. Every year in China, there are around 350 earthquakes of magnitudes between 7 and 7.8, and there are about 6 to 7 of these quakes every year. Most of these quakes are not enough to cause great structural damage or loss of lives, although every once in a while, a particularly bad one occurs. As a proactive nation, China does have an added advantage in that they have developed technology to predict an earthquake so as to give people living in those high-risk areas time to evacuate. Other measures being taken by the government include updating building standards, adding shock absorbers, and trying to make the structure as a whole safer in order to minimize casualties due to an earthquake. Number 8. Peru. Peru has had its fair share of earthquakes, with the most devastating one claiming over 70,000 during its occurrence. I would also guarantee that for most Peruvians, the sight of such destruction would strike fear in their hearts. You would be surprised to know that all these happened in 1970, but guess what? Peru is still at risk of experiencing such disasters again. This is linked to North American and Nazca plates colliding with each other at the speed of 77 kilometers a year, developing tension that leads to such earthquakes, thus making Peru a seismic zone. I am not joking. About 400 to 500 in the course of the year, Peru suffers from these earth shakers, and these are caused totally due to tectonic plates. It sure is terrible, but what steps is the government taking to make sure that the people are not affected by these earthquakes? Well, the government has set aside specific budgets to help with the aftermath of such destruction, and in turn, they have disaster management programs to ensure that the people are looked after when these unfortunate events occur. And if that wasn't enough, they are also working to make sure that the people are living in safer building structures. They are also issuing financial expenses to those families that have suffered because of these natural disasters. They are crushing it. Number 7. Guatemala. Guatemala sits along 2 fault lines, the Motagua Fault and the Chicxoy-Polochic Fault, which intersect within the country, placing Guatemala within a zone with a high level of seismic activity. These 2 faults also form a tectonic boundary between the North American Plate and the Caribbean Plate. Because of this, Guatemala undergoes active earthquakes practically every year. Some are very minor, while others are extremely severe. Any government would want to avert the loss of such large numbers of civilians. Thus, the government has enacted several policies to help prevent such a major loss of civilians, suggesting that they are indeed doing something. Some of these changes include amending building codes and upgrading technology so that damage prediction is as simple as 1, 2, or 3. The government has also made provisions to allow civilians to defend themselves during the occurrence of an earthquake. The Guatemalan people may recall the catastrophe to have been one of the bloodiest in the country's history, which took place in 1976. No country wishes to lose about 23,000 civilians once again. Therefore, at least basic preventive measures should be in place. Number 6. Papua New Guinea. Papua New Guinea is located on the Pacific Ring of Fire, which is the most seismic zone in the world. The region also has many volcanoes, and all this means that there are frequent earthquakes in the area. The country has small earthquakes daily, while some larger ones occur frequently. In a given year, the country experiences at least one major earthquake that leads to a lot of destruction. To decrease the probability of future earthquakes, the government is taking several measures. These are through collaboration with Geoscience Australia to establish a community-led system to track disasters. The country is also incorporating the latest technologies, such as Raspberry Regular Shake Basis sensors, with a supplement view to monitoring and enhancing the volcanic standards activities of such construction risks, and are ensuring that structures are better equipped to withstand earthquakes. Number 5. Chile. Chile is located on the rapidly moving Nazca Plate, causing frequent earthquakes. Such earthquakes going around the world in numbers are almost 1/3 in Chile. The most deadly earthquake in Chile's history took place near Valdivia in 1960. It is famous for registering a gigantic 9.5 on the Richter scale, which is the highest ever recorded. Over 1,655 lives were lost to this disastrous event, but that number is lower than the actual, as many more remain unlisted. The economy was dealt a blow that paralyzed Chile. Coral reef damage in 1960 has since continued to experience about 900 earthquakes in the range of 4.5 to 7.0 annually. As of 2024, this year alone, Chile has already felt 171 earthquakes. This is exactly what Chile is doing, putting up programs to lessen the potential damage it poses on its people. Number 4. Philippines. Being located at the edge of the Ring of Fire, earthquakes are common in the Philippines. The country sees a significant number of seismic occurrences every year, so it does not come as a big surprise. On average, around 800 earthquakes are recorded annually, with a magnitude of 6.5. Just by 2023, around 1,400 were recorded. As a step toward alleviating the effects of future earthquakes, strict codes of building regulations and school standards were introduced by the government. All schools offer disaster management courses in their curriculums, and the building companies are required to adopt building codes that ensure strong structures survive during an earthquake. All these efforts are geared towards saving lives and making recovery easier after a disaster. The government sure does not want a repeat of the country's most disastrous earthquake, which claimed 8,000 lives and left behind property damage that may never be remedied. Number 3. Japan. Japan ranks at the top of the countries most frequently having earthquakes. In the Pacific Ring of Fire, the country is established. Earthquakes here refer to movements in which several tectonic plates move. Japan is perhaps not a new country in earthquakes. It has also experienced many of the most horrific earthquakes in history. Probably the most tragic was on 11th of March 2011. It had a magnitude of 9.1, killing about 15,000 people. After this, Japan was struck by an even more devastating tsunami.
126 million people watched their world crumbling around them. The earthquake, 8.9, one of the biggest ever. And then 35 minutes later, the tsunami racing at the speed of a jumbo jet. Here's what it looked like on the ground. You can see it as it pulverizes houses.
Japan gets hit with more than a couple thousand quakes every year, most putting away between 4.0 and 7.0 on the Richter scale. The country has, therefore, invested in disaster preparedness practices at great cost and built very strict rules on construction to ensure that buildings can withstand seismic activity. There are also several training drills and awareness initiatives for the general public on responses to earthquakes. Number 2, Mexico. Mexico is second only to Japan concerning earthquake activity worldwide. There are more than 1,300 earthquakes recorded every year. Lies in the subduction zone, where one plate, the North American, slides over the Cocos Plate, Mexico endures constant seismic events. Mexico is among the countries that experience earthquake attacks every year, at least from 4.0 to 7.0 Richter scales. But the one that made a huge impact in the country is an 8.0 magnitude earthquake that has left over 30,000 casualties. Mexico has learned its lesson. The nation has invested in advanced technology for the prediction of seismic activity, so no more surprises. A set of strict codes enforced by the government regarding construction for both people and structures during an earthquake is in place. There are also numerous financial support mechanisms to assist the people from affected regions in their recovery following these natural disasters. Number 1, Indonesia. In terms of the most earthquake-affected countries, Indonesia tops the list with over 1,600 earthquakes occurring invariably every year. It falls on the Pacific Ring of Fire, which makes the country part of the area where more than 90% of the world's earthquakes occur. Every year, the Asian country experiences widespread devastation due to earthquakes, which mostly range in severity between 6.0 to 8.0 on the Richter scale. Indonesia is aware of the threat these earthquakes pose and has managed to increase vegetation across the country to enhance resilience and reduce risks associated with these earthquakes. There are very stringent building laws and codes that govern the construction of buildings and houses, where a special emphasis shall be placed on the display of safety rules or instructions during construction to make certain that the structures will survive an earthquake. We've come to the end of today's video. Thank you for watching and see you soon.